The following is a class on the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, chapter number 16, text number 26, given by His Grace Sriman Sankarshan Das Adhikari, recorded on September 1st, 2009, in Sofia, Bulgaria.
So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, chapter number 16, text number 26. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Etassureta Ragatim Pratipadya Sajya Sangramba Sambrita Samadhya Nubadda Yoga Bhuyasakashamupayasya ashuyova Shapo mayaiva nivitastavarita vipra Shri Bhagavan Vacha Etassureta Ragatim Pratipadya Sajya Sangramba Sambrita Samadhya Nubadda Yoga Bhuyasakashamupayasyata ashuyova Shapo mayaiva nimitastad aveta vipra. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The Lord replied, O Brahmanas, I know that the punishment you inflicted on them which was originally ordained by me, and therefore they will fall to a birth in a demoniac family. But they will be firmly united with me in thought through mental concentration, intensified by anger, and they will return to my presence shortly. Purport. The Lord stated that the punishment inflicted by the sages upon the doorkeepers, Jai and Vijay, was conceived by the Lord Himself. Without the Lord's sanction, nothing can happen. It is to be understood that there was a plan in the cursing of the Lord's devotees in Vaikuntha, and His plan is explained by stalwart authorities. The Lord sometimes desires to fight, and the fighting spirit also exists in the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, how could fighting be manifest at all? Actually, Prabhupada in one lecture said Krishna wants to keep his body fit. Of course, he doesn't need to do that, but still he likes to work out. He likes to fight. Get a really good workout. Because the Lord is the source of everything, anger and fighting are also inherent in His personality. When He desires to fight with someone, He has to find an enemy, but in the Vaikuntha world there is no enemy because everyone is fully engaged in His service. Therefore, He sometimes comes to the material world as an incarnation in order to manifest His fighting spirit. In the Bhagavad Gita 4.8 also it is said the Lord appears just to give protection to the devotees and to annihilate the non-devotees. The non-devotees are found in the material world, not in the spiritual world. Therefore the Lord, when the Lord wants to fight, He has to come to this world. But who will fight with the Supreme Lord? No one is able to fight with Him. Therefore, because the Lord's pastimes in the material world are always performed with His associates, not with others, He has to find some devotee who will play the part of an enemy. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says to Arjuna, my dear Arjuna, both you and I have appeared many, many times in this material world, but you have forgotten, whereas I remember. Thus, Jai and Vijay were selected by the Lord to fight with him in the material world, and that was the reason the sages came to see him, and accidentally the doorkeepers were cursed. It was the Lord's desire to send them to the material world, not perpetually, but for some time. Therefore, just as on a theatrical stage someone takes the part of an enemy to the proprietor of the stage, although the play is for a short time, and there is no permanent enmity between the servant and the proprietor, so these Surajanas, devotees, were cursed by the sages to go to the Asurajana, or atheistic families. That a devotee should come into an atheistic family is surprising, but it is simply a show. After finishing their mock fighting, both the devotee and the Lord are again associated in the spiritual planets. This is very explicitly explained here. The conclusion is that no one falls from the spiritual world, or Vaikuntha planet, for it is an eternal abode. But sometimes as the Lord desires, devotees come into this material world as preachers or as atheists. In each case, we must understand that there is a plan of the Lord. Lord Buddha, for example, was an incarnation, yet he preached atheism. There is no God. But actually there was a plan behind this, as explained in the Bhagavatam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jata Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajiva Sadaitam Savadutam Prijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. So, in this purport, Srila Prabhupada says that no one falls from the spiritual world. But yet in other places, Prabhupada said that we fell from the spiritual world. So this is created there's a controversy in our society over this point. Some devotees argue, well, when Prabhupada said that we fell from Vaikuntha, it's just a preaching tactic. We didn't really fall from Vaikuntha. They say that we conditioned souls came from somewhere else. But you can't really say that. It's not proper to say that Prabhupada said something that's not true. It's just as a preaching tactic. That's offensive against Srila Prabhupada. I remember when I was a young brahmachari, I came across what appeared to be a contradiction in Prabhupada's teachings.
бях млад брамачари, веднъж попаднах на едно нещо, което изглеждаше като противоречие в ученията на Шрила Прабхупада.
In a Back to Godhead magazine article, there was a lecture by Prabhupada, and in this lecture he said the Atharva Veda is the original Veda.
В една лекция от Back to Godhead списанието на Шрила Прабхупада, той казваше, че Атарва Веда е изначалната Веда.
And in the Srimad Bhagavatam purport, he said the Yajur Veda is the original Veda.
А в един коментар към Шримад Бхагаватам той каже, че Яджур Веда е изначалната Веда.
So I couldn't figure it out. How could both of them be the original Veda?
И аз не можех да разбера как и двете могат да са изначалната Веда.
So I approached my devotee, who was my authority, His Holiness Vishnu Janaswami, and I asked him, which one's the original Veda?
Аз се обърнах към моя авторитет, правилно дадения, който отговаряше за мен, Вишну Джанасвами.
And he gave me a very wonderful answer.
И го попитах коя е изначалната Веда и той ми даде прекрасен отговор.
He spoke from the platform of having full faith in Srila Prabhupada.
Той говори от платформата на пълна вяра в думите на Шрила
We're
Прабхупада.
speaking on the fall-no-fall controversy, because it came up in the purport today. So, this was a controversy in my mind, that in one place Prabhupada says the Yajur Veda is the original Veda, in another place he says the Atharva Veda is the original Veda.
Това беше противоречие в ума ми. На едно място Шрила Прабхупада каза, че Атарва Веда е изначалната Веда, на друго.
I was thinking, how could they both be true? I mean, it seems contradictory.
Чудих се как е възможно и двете да са вярни, изглежда противоречиво.
But when Vishnu Jan Maharaj told me, he said, they're both the original Veda, I said, yes, that's right. They're both the original Veda.
Когато Вишну Джана Махарадж ми каза, че и двете са изначалната Веда, аз си казах, да, наистина.
Is it logical?
Логично ли е това?
No.
Не е много логично.
It's not at all logical.
Изобщо не е логично.
But is it a statement of faith in Srila Prabhupada?
Но това е твърдение с пълна вяра в Шрила Прабхупада.
Yes. Yasya deve para bhaktir tata deve tata guru tasyaite katita hyarta prakashante mahatmanaha. Only unto those souls who have unflinching faith in every word that their spiritual master utters, and in the teachings of Krishna are all the imports of Vedic knowledge revealed.
Само на тези души, които имат пълна вяра в всяка една дума на духовния учител и в върховната божествена личност, само от тях се разкрива знанието на Ведите.
So I was absolutely delighted with Vishnu Jan Maharaj's answer.
И аз бях напълно очарован от отговора на Вишну Джана.
So I thought, well, I don't know how, but somehow or other they're both the original Veda.
И аз разбрах, че не знам как, но по някакъв начин и двете са изначалната Веда.
And then years later, when the whole Bhagavatam wasn't available yet, but then years later, a later canto was published. And Prabhupada addressed this controversy in his purport.
И години по-късно, когато излезе целият Бхагаватам, в един коментар Шрила Прабхупада засегна това противоречие.
He said, according to some authorities, the Yajur Veda is the original Veda, and according to other authorities, the Atharva Veda is the original Veda.
Той каза, според някои авторитети, Яджур Веда е изначалната Веда, според други Атарва Веда.
In other words, amongst our Vaishnava authorities, on some points of philosophy, there are differences.
С други думи, сред нашите вайшнава авторитети, по някои въпроси философски съществуват различия.
In such cases, you can cite either authority and be correct.
В такива случаи вие можете да станете на страната на който и да е от авторитетите и да бъдете прав.
These are details,
Това са подробности,
and they're not that important for the ultimate understanding of our philosophy.
които не са толкова важни за цялостното разбиране на нашата философия.
So in the same way, we have authoritative statements saying that we fell from the spiritual world, and that no one can fall from the spiritual world.
Така че имаме авторитет, двете твърдения са авторитетни, че никой не пада от духовния свят и че ние сме паднали.
So we should not use one statement to negate the other one.
Ние не трябва да използваме едно твърдение, за да отречем.
That is a lack of faith in Prabhupada.
Това се нарича липса на вяра в Шрила Прабхупада.
Rather, we should pray for the realization of understanding how they both can be true.
По-скоро ние трябва да се молиме за да осъзнаем как и двете са верни.
And actually, there are transcendental logical ways of understanding how they both can be true.
И всъщност има трансцендентални начини логически да се разбере как и двете са верни.
There are two terms. There are nitya baddha and nitya siddha.
Има два термина, нитя бада и нитя сида.
Both of them indicate that no fall takes place.
И двете посочват, че няма падане.
Nitya baddha means you've been eternally in the cycle of birth and death.
Нитя бада означава душа, която е била вечно в цикъла на раждането и смъртта.
Nitya siddha means you've been eternally in the spiritual kingdom.
А нитя сида означава, че сте били вечно в духовното царство.
There is no indication in either term of switching from one side to the other.
Няма индикация в един от двата термина, който да показва прехвърляне от едното в другото състояние.
On one side, switching means falling down. On the other side, switching means going back to Godhead.
От едната страна имаме падане от духовния свят, от друга страна имаме връщане обратно в духовния свят.
But these two terms, eternally conditioned and eternally liberated, are there again and again and again in our books.
Но тези два термина, вечно обусловени и вечно освободени, отново и отново ги срещаме в книгите.
Prabhupada says the nitya baddha, when he becomes siddha, then he becomes nitya siddha.
Шрила Прабхупад казва, че когато нитя бада стане сида, той става нитя сида.
So how are we to understand that?
Как може да разберем това?
Well, if you consider it from this point, it begins to become comprehensible.
Ако разгледате от тази гледна точка, може да започне да разбирате.
This material world is the realm of time.
Материалният свят е обител на времето.
Everything is experienced here in terms of past, present, and future.
Всичко, което изпитваме тук е в трите части на времето, минало, настояще и бъдеще.
Srila Prabhupada explains in the spiritual world, time is conspicuous by its absence.
Шрила Прабхупад обяснява, че в духовния свят времето
There's no past, present, and future.
там няма минало, настояще и бъдеще.
That means we're presently in the material world. That we know.
Това означава, че ние в момента се намираме в материалния свят и това го знаем.
There is a spiritual world. That we know.
Има и духовен свят и това знаем.
It's clearly explained in the Bhagavad Gita that by surrendering to Krishna, we qualify ourselves to enter into that spiritual world.
От Бхагавад Гита разбираме, че като се квалифицираме, отдавайки се на Кришна, ние влизаме в духовния свят.
Okay, now consider this. The devotee now enters the spiritual world.
Да разгледаме това. Един предан отдаван влиза в духовния свят.
He's there with Krishna in Krishna's pastime now.
Той е там с Кришна в забавленията на Кришна.
But remember, there's no time, there's no past and future in the spiritual world, just the eternal present.
Но няма минало и бъдеще в духовния свят, само вечно настояще.
So that means he never fell.
Това означава, че той никога не е падал.
He had no past history of being a conditioned soul. Because it's a little hard to grasp because we're totally caught up in time. But actually, if there's no past, present, and future in the spiritual world, once he goes back to Godhead, he doesn't have any past history of being a conditioned soul.
Много е трудно да го схванем, защото ние напълно сме под влияние на времето.
Therefore, he's nitya siddha.
Тъй като няма минало, настояще и бъдеще в духовния свят, там значи няма минала история на падането.
And then what about the nitya baddha term?
Затова той е нитя сида. А какво да кажем за нитя бада?
Nitya baddha, Prabhupada explains you cannot measure when you fell from the spiritual world to the material world. There's no measurable time when it happened.
Шрила Прабхупад казва, че не може да се измери времето, преди което сме паднали в духовния.
The Viraja River is the boundary between the spiritual world and the material world.
Вираджа реката е границата между духовния и материалния свят.
It is a realm of timelessness.
Това е една обител на безвремие.
Time doesn't exist at that crossing point.
На тази пресечна точка не съществува време.
So that means if somehow or other you're here in this material world, there's no time, there's no actual time when you entered here.
Което значи, че това, че сте тук в материалния свят, не може да се измери с точно време.
So that means you're eternally here.
Което означава, че вие вечно сте тук.
So in other words, the reason we have difficulty understanding these concepts is we are locked into seeing everything, because we are conditioned souls, we are locked into seeing everything in terms of past, present, and future.
И причината, поради която виждаме противоречие в тези въпроси, е, че ние сме обособени души, които са заключени
We cannot conceive of timelessness.
в рамките на времето. Ние не можем да си представим безвремието.
It's inconceivable to us.
За нас то е невъобразимо.
That's why these things are not easy for us to understand.
Ето защо тези неща не са ни лесни за разбиране.
But the good news is this.
Добрите новини обаче са,
Gyanena tu tad agyanam yesham nashitam atmanaha tesham adityam vajgyanam prakashayati tatparam. When one is enlightened with that knowledge, by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, just like the sun lights up everything in the daytime.
когато човек е просветлен с това знание, което унищожава невежеството, всичко се разкрива, както човек може да види.
So all we really have to do is become Krishna conscious.
Всичко, което трябва да направим, е да станем Кришна осъзнати.
And then everything will become very clear.
Тогава всичко ще ни се изясни много ясно.
We simply have to become reinstated in pure devotional service.
Ние просто трябва отново да вземем позицията си в чисто правилно служение.
We are not constitutionally conditioned souls. That's a fact. We know that from Lord Chaitanya.
По своята изначална позиция ние не сме обусловени.
Jivera Sarupa Hoy Krishnera Nityadas. The constitutional position of the living entity is he is the servant of Krishna.
Лорд Чайтания казва, че изначалната позиция на живото същество е слуга на Кришна.
So our very nature, the very essence of our being is servitude towards Krishna.
Затова нашата природа, нашата същност е служенето към Кришна.
This is why we understand that we are originally serving Krishna in the spiritual world.
Затова ние можем да разберем, че изначално ние служиме на Кришна в духовния свят.
And it's confirmed by Srila Prabhupada in many places that we were with Krishna and serving him.
Това се потвърждава от Шрила Прабхупад на много места.
So, what is our fall to this material existence? What is the reality of it?
Това е реалността на нашето падане от духовния свят.
We know that it's factual
Ние знаем, че то е действително,
because we're feeling the pain right now of conditioned life.
защото в момента усещаме болките на обособения живот.
So what is it though in terms of our ultimate identity is Krishna's servants? What is it? It's a lapse into forgetfulness is what it is.
Това състояние в момента се дължи на забравянето ни за Кришна.
We're actually the eternal servants of Krishna, simply we've forgotten.
Всъщност ние сме вечни слуги на Кришна, но просто сме го забравили.
Sometimes we see when we're giving the Bhagavatam class, a devotee will nod out.
Понякога виждаме, че по време на лекция Бхагаватам, преданограните
Is he in the Bhagavatam class?
се оклюмват.
In one sense he is.
Дали са на Бхагаватам клас? В
Is he not in the Bhagavatam class?
известен смисъл са.
He's definitely not in the Bhagavatam class.
Не е ли не отсъстваш от Бхагаватам клас? Да.
So he is in the Bhagavatam class and he's not in the Bhagavatam class.
Така че той е на Бхагаватам клас и той не е същевременно.
Did he leave the class?
Напуснал ли е лекцията?
Well, in one sense he didn't because he's still sitting there.
В известен смисъл не е, защото все още стои.
But did he leave the class? He sure did. He went in a time ago.
Но дали
You see?
напуснал лекцията? Да, защото е там го.
So the no fall controversy is kind of like, well, is he in the class or is he not in the class?
Така че този спор дали сме паднали или не паднали е като този
That's how we should see the controversy.
въпрос дали сме на лекциите или не сме.
The GBC has had a book. They had a whole book written called Our Original Position. They commissioned a book should be written, Our Original Position.
GBC издаваха цяла книга, наречена нашето изначално положение.
To confirm with Shastric evidence and logical evidence that indeed we, with all kinds of evidence from Shastra, from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, etc., that we were indeed in the spiritual world with Krishna.
За да потвърдят логически и с доказателства от шастрите, че ние сме били изначално духовни.
Prabhupada's consistent use of so many English language reconfirms that point again and again. He says, back to Godhead.
Употребата на различни английски думи и фрази от Шрила Прабхупад отново потвърждава
Return to the spiritual world.
това, че сме били, когато казва обратно при Бога, връщане в духовния свят.
Prabhupada uses these terms again and again and again.
Шрила Прабхупад отново и отново използва тези термини.
So we shouldn't think it was just a preaching tactic.
Така че не трябва да си мислим, че това е просто проповедническа.
Those who say that we were never in the spiritual world, they say this was just Prabhupada's preaching tactic.
Тези, които казват, че не сме били в духовния свят, те всъщност казват, че това е проповедническа тактика на Шрила Прабхупад.
Because in the Western world, we had this idea that we fell from the spiritual world, and Prabhupada had to cater to our Western mentality to help us become attracted to Krishna consciousness.
Те казват, че понеже на Запад имаме тази идея, че сме паднали в духовния свят, затова Шрила Прабхупад трябва да пригоди своята пропаганда, така че да стане да приеме Кришна.
But I would argue that that's a ridiculous argument because we would have accepted anything. Prabhupada didn't have to do that. I mean, was he catering to our Western mentality when he introduced Jagannath as the Supreme Lord?
Тогава аз бих казал, че това е един много нелеп аргумент, защото ние нямаше да приемем нищо, ако...
I ask you, what God-fearing Christian, if you show him Jagannath and say, here is God, will he say yes? He would say, idol.
Примерно аз бих попитал кой така богобоязлив християнин би, когато му покажете муртито на Джаганат и му кажете, че това е
If
Бог.
Prabhupada had simply wanted to cater to our Judeo-Christian conditioning, he never would have shown us Jagannath.
Ако Шрила Прабхупад просто искаше да се нагоди към нашето идео-християнско разбиране,
Prabhupada
никой
did
нямаше
not
да покаже Джаганат.
say, well, I have to cater to the Judeo-Christian prejudice that they fell from the spiritual world. I have to tell them they did that so they'll accept Krishna consciousness.
Прабхупад никога нямаше да каже, че за да се нагоди към нашето
It's a very weak argument.
той никога нямаше да каже, че сме
And Jagannath is the proof. We accepted Jagannath.
и доказателство за това е
Actually, Shamasundar jokingly said, nowhere but Haight-Ashbury. That's where Prabhupada introduced to the, in Haight-Ashbury, all the LSD hippies. Prabhupada, he said, nowhere but Haight-Ashbury would they accept it. But actually, it's not true. All over the world, people accepted it. He first introduced in Haight-Ashbury, that's a fact.
както Шамасундър се шегува, че никъде другаде, освен на Хейт-Ашбъри, нямаше да приемат, но всъщност
But all over the world, he introduced.
не е така. Шрила Прабхупад навсякъде е въвел това и навсякъде са го приели.
In fact, Prabhupada is taking Jagannath on the streets for the general public to see. This is our God.
Всъщност Прабхупад изкарал Джаганат за всички хора да го видят и казва, ето това е нашия Бог.
Down Fifth Avenue in the New York City, the most prominent street in the most prominent city of the world, we parade for many, many miles. Here is our God, Jagannath, to all the public.
На Пето авеню в Нью Йорк ние парадирахме с мъртвото на Джаганат, казвайки, ето това е нашия Бог.
So if Prabhupada had wanted to cater to the Western conditioned life, he would never have introduced his Jagannath to the general public like this.
И така, ако Шрила Прабхупад искаше просто да се нагласи за нашето западно разбиране, той никой нямаше да въведе обожението на Джаганат.
So therefore, we should not think it was just a preaching tactic when he said that we fell from the spiritual realm. We have to think that just as we have a Chincha Beta Beta Tattva, simultaneously, inconceivably one and different, we also have simultaneously, inconceivably fall and no fall. So that's the proper understanding of Siddhanta, this connection. So are there any questions? Yes.
How to perform most perfectly our service, in our case, as a neophyte devotees.
The neophyte devotee will quickly advance if they always endeavor to do their service perfectly. So, this is a very nice question. How will a neophyte devotee become perfect in their service? The key here is obedience. Key word is obedience. Disciple means discipline. One should discipline oneself to always be obedient to the spiritual master. And to the senior Vaishnavas also, who represent the spiritual master. By being very humble and obedient servant of Guru and Vaishnavas, one will quickly become perfect in Krishna consciousness. So just try to always be obedient, humble servant. In the beginning, we are all humble because we don't know anything about Krishna consciousness. But what happens to many ISKCON devotees, as soon as they learn a little bit about, as we call it, learning the ropes, as soon as they become a little familiar with how to do everything, they become very proud. Oh, now I am a great big devotee, you see. No one can tell me anything now. And then devotees wonder. They say, when I joined, I was so enlivened, but now I'm miserable. Why is that? Because they gave up that humility they had when they were new. And now then they think, now I am a big, great devotee. If you always keep that innocent humility you had when you first joined, always realize, I don't know everything. Then you will advance very quickly in Krishna consciousness. Always keep yourself very meek and humble, you see. Actually, the more you advance in Krishna consciousness, the more you will feel meek and humble. So if you start detecting, you're feeling yourself to be proud, oh, now I'm a very advanced devotee, then you have to understand that Maya is taking over your mind.
Когато усещаш, че ставаш, се възготвяваш и си мислиш за напреднал даден, тогава трябва да разбереш, че Мая те завладява ума ти.
So in this way, if you start becoming proud, just tell Maya to get away.
Затова винаги когато усетиш, че се възготвяваш, просто казвай на Мая да си върви.
Always consider yourself to be very meek, very humble devotee. You see, always think yourself to be very lowly, humble Vaishnava. That you must always think.
Винаги мисли за себе си като много кротка и смирена предан отдадена Вайшнава.
Any other questions?
Други въпроси?
Yeah. Is it true that our stay here in the material world equals only a few moments in the spiritual world? Yes. Our whole sojourn will just be like practically nothing. Just like you're in the class, you're not out for a second, you come back. It'll be like that. When we wake up in the spiritual world, we'll still have some connection. We'll be able to remember, when I got initiated and the devotees, because they're all connected with the spiritual world. We'll be able to remember our devotional activities. And we can remember anything we want of what was here, but it'll just be like a brief little nodding out for a second when we get back to our original rasa with Krishna. Sarup. Yeah.
Това може да се сравни точно като с клюването по време на клас. Това за няколко мига. И всъщност, когато се върнем на духовния свят, ние ще се спомняме някои неща, които са били свързани с правилното служение или каквото искаме, но то действително е наистина няколко като миг.
So our time has run out. We thank you all very much for coming to the Bhagavatam class. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grandaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Sankarshan Prabhu ki jai.